My name is Clara Benton. I am 82 years old. People see my silver hair, the cane I lean on when the arthritis flares, the trembling of my hands when I pour tea, and they think they know me. They think my story is nearly finished, that I am nothing more than a woman in the twilight of her years. But they don't know the truth, not yet. Because the day everything changed wasn't the day I became old. It was the day I realized that age didn't make me weak. Made me dangerous. It began on a winter evening, the kind where the sky turns a bruised purple before dusk and the cold seeps through the walls no matter how high you set the thermostat. I had just finished setting the table in my daughter's dining room. My fingers trembled as I laid out the silverware, the forks clinking lightly against the plates. I thought no one noticed, but he did. Her husband, Robert. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, a sneer playing on his lips. "Look at her," he said loudly enough for the room to hear. Hands shaking like a leaf in the wind. Surprised the fork didn't stab her by accident. I froze. The fork I was holding hovering above the table. My chest burned, but I forced a smile, the kind mothers wear when they want to keep the peace. "Just the arthritis," I murmured. "Nothing to worry about." But he wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes glinting with mockery. "You sure it's not something worse? I mean, at her age, who knows? Might just keel over during dessert. Save us the trouble of nursing her." Laughter filled the room. Not from strangers. Not from neighbors. From my daughter, Clara. She giggled, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting away from mine as if she couldn't bear to look at me. My own flesh and blood, the girl I raised through every scraped knee, every fever, every heartbreak, laughing at my humiliation. I felt something inside me crack. The dinner carried on as though nothing had happened. They ate, they drank, they shared jokes I wasn't part of. My plate remained half empty, my appetite gone. I sat in silence, staring at the glistening roast chicken, the steaming potatoes, the wine swirling in crystal glasses, but tasting none of it. All I could hear was Robert's voice echoing in my ears. All I could see was Clara's laughter, sharp as glass. After dinner, as I carried dishes into the kitchen, my hands trembled more than usual. One plate slipped, shattering on the tile. I bent down quickly, but Robert was already there, crouching just out of reach. "Careful, Clara," he said with mock sympathy. "Wouldn't want you cutting yourself. Not that it matters. You bleed easy now, don't you?" Behind him, Clara chuckled again. A low, embarrassed laugh, but laughter all the same. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my dignity in shards beside the broken porcelain. My heart thundered in my chest, but I kept my face calm. Because in that moment, something else bloomed beneath the pain. Resolve. They thought my hands shook because I was weak. They thought my tears fell because I was broken. But what they didn't know was that a mother's strength doesn't die with age. Grows sharper, quieter, more dangerous. That night, as I lay in the guest room they had so generously offered after insisting, I could no longer live alone. I stared at the ceiling and let the memory of their laughter sear into me like fire branding flesh. And I promised myself, they would regret it. As the house settled into silence, I heard them talking in the next room. "She's slipping fast," Robert whispered. "Won't be long before she's completely useless." Clara laughed again, softly this time. "She's already useless." My eyes burned. My hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea what I was about to become. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. When Clara was born, I was already 40. Late, the neighbors said, almost too late. But to me, she was right on time. A miracle I never thought I would hold. I remember her tiny fists clutching my finger. Her cries softening the moment I whispered her name. I promised then and there that I would never let her feel alone in this world. Her father, Thomas, was a good man, though his life was far too short. He worked himself to the bone in the factory, his hands calloused and rough, but his touch always gentle with Clara. When she was 5, a collapse in the steelworks took him from us. That night, as I clutched Clara in my arms, her tears soaking into my dress, I whispered into her hair, "Don't you worry, baby girl. Mama's here. Mama will always be here." From then on, it was just us. We were a pair stitched together by loss and love. I worked long days at the library, shelving books until my back ached, and then long nights mending clothes or baking bread to make ends meet. Clara would sit at the kitchen table with her homework, tapping her pencil, and I'd quiz her on spelling words while kneading dough. She liked to say we were a team. "Just me and you, Mama." Even as she grew into a young woman, she clung to me in small ways. She'd bring her heartbreaks to my lap, sobbing about boys who didn't call back. She'd pull me into the kitchen to help her practice recipes, even when she was old enough to cook on her own. And on her graduation day, when she stood in her cap and gown, she ran to me before anyone else, hugging me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "We made it," she whispered. "Together." I believed her. Believed we always would. The first time she brought Robert home, I tried to see what she saw. He was tall, well-dressed, with a smile that lit up every room. But it was the kind of smile that lingered too long, like a mask he wore until it slipped. At dinner, he complimented the roast chicken I made, but added, "You sure you didn't overseason it? Some people lose their taste as they age." Clara laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Don't be silly, Robert." I smiled too, but something in me clenched. It was just one comment, I told myself. Nothing more. But then came the others. "You really think she should still be driving at her age? Maybe she shouldn't handle the bills anymore. It's a lot for someone older. She forgets things, doesn't she?" "It happens." Always with that smirk. Always with Clara nearby, smiling a little less each time, until one day she stopped correcting him at all. The cracks began to widen after Clara married him. She visited less, her calls grew shorter. When she did come, Robert was always there, hovering, charming but sharp when my daughter wasn't looking. He'd adjust the photos on the mantel, moving Thomas's picture further back each time. He'd pat my shoulder just a little too hard when saying goodbye, as though testing how brittle I was. When my health began to falter, the arthritis stiffening my joints, the faint tremor in my hands, Clara suggested I move in with them. First I felt relief. Thought, my daughter wants me close. She remembers her promise. The first few weeks weren't terrible. Clara and I would cook together just like old times. We'd sit with tea in the afternoons, talking about her children. I felt like I had a place again. But Robert was always there, watching, interrupting. One afternoon, I reached for a mug in the cupboard and my hand trembled. The porcelain slipped, crashing onto the counter. Robert's chuckle followed almost instantly. "Guess the kitchen's not safe for you anymore, Clara." Clara bit her lip, but instead of defending me, she said softly, "Maybe Mom should rest more. She's not as steady as she used to be." The words stung more than Robert's laughter. Because they weren't his. They were hers. The woman who once swore we were a team was now agreeing with him, piece by piece, until I felt like a guest in her home. No, not a guest. Burden. And still I tried to hold on. I tried to believe that somewhere inside her, my daughter still remembered the nights I rocked her through fevers, the mornings I braided her hair before school, the sacrifices she never saw. But the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Robert was feeding her a story. And she was starting to believe it. One night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "She's slipping," Robert said. Hands shaking, memory going. "Won't be long before she's completely dependent." Cara's voice followed, soft but steady. "I know." The words landed like a blade in my chest. My own daughter knew. And she didn't fight it. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. It was a Sunday, the kind of day that used to mean family dinners, warm kitchens, and laughter echoing through the halls. But in Cara's house, Sundays had become something else entirely. Robert's stage. That morning I had tried to help set the table. My hands shook as I laid down the cutlery, my fingers stiff with arthritis. A fork slipped from my grip, clattering against the floor. Robert's laugh cut through the air instantly. "There it is again," he said, clapping his hands mockingly like he was applauding a performance. Shaky hands. "She can't even set a table anymore without making a scene." Heat flushed my face. I bent to pick up the fork, but he was faster. He grabbed it, dangled it in front of me like a prize and said, "Careful now, Clara. Wouldn't want you stabbing yourself. Blood's thin at your age, isn't it?" Froze. My throat closed, my hands trembling even more. Not from arthritis but from rage and humiliation. And then, like salt rubbed into the wound, Clara laughed. Not a nervous giggle this time, not a laugh to smooth things over. A laugh that joined his. "My daughter. My Clara." The sound sliced through me. I straightened slowly, every joint in my body screaming, and placed the fork back on the table without a word. Silence was the only shield I had left. But Robert wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, his eyes gleaming with cruelty. "Tell me, Clara," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "How long do you think before she can't feed herself? A month? 2? We might as well start looking at homes now." My breath caught. Clara hesitated, glancing at me, but only for a second. Then she lowered her eyes and whispered, "Maybe sooner." The room spun. My knees weakened. I sank into a chair before I collapsed altogether. "See?" Robert grinned, raising his glass. "She knows it too. Old age comes for us all. Some just quicker than others." They carried on with their meal as if nothing had happened. I sat there, staring at the plate in front of me, the roast chicken glistening under the light. My stomach churned, but I couldn't eat. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. Later that evening, as I washed the dishes, because despite everything I still did what I could, Robert walked in behind me. The water ran hot over my hands, steam rising, but my fingers shook so violently I nearly dropped the plate. "Pathetic," he muttered. He didn't bother to whisper. "You should see yourself, Clara." Shaking like a drunk. No wonder Clara laughs. I turned, dish in hand, my voice trembling. "Why do you do this? Why do you try to break me?" He stepped closer, his smile sharp. "Because you're already broken. You just don't want to admit it." I wanted Clara to step in. I wanted her to defend me, to put a hand on mine and remind me I wasn't alone. But she stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face cold. "You make it hard, Mom," she said quietly. "Always so dramatic. Robert's just telling the truth." The truth. Her words knocked the breath from me. The truth wasn't that I was failing. The truth was that she had chosen him, chosen to laugh at my tears, chosen to let him mock my hands, my age, my life. That night, I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. My chest ached with a pain no pill could ease. For the first time, I wished Thomas were still alive. I wished Clara could see herself through his eyes, see how far she had fallen. But wishing was useless. Because in that moment I realized I had lost her. My daughter wasn't mine anymore. She was his. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I heard Robert's voice through the thin walls. "She won't last much longer," he whispered. Cara's laughter followed, soft but cruel. "She doesn't even fight back anymore." The sound of it lodged deep in my chest, twisting like a blade. They thought they had broken me. But broken things have sharp edges. And mine would cut deeper than they ever imagined. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The morning after their laughter rang through the thin walls, I woke with swollen eyes and a hollow chest. 4 hours I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words echoing over and over. She doesn't even fight back anymore. They believed it. They believed I was broken, a husk of a woman too frail to matter, too weak to resist. And for too long I had let them. But tears dry. Pain hardens. And what's left behind is something sharper. That morning when I rose from the bed, the weakness in my legs felt different. Not a curse but a reminder. If my body couldn't fight them, my mind would. I began to really think about what power I had left. And then it came to me. Robert believed I was useless. Clara believed I was fading. But I had one thing they had overlooked: memory. Years of memory. I had kept records just like I always had. Bills, letters, prescriptions, bank statements. I had filed them neatly in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed when I moved in. Habits carried from a lifetime of careful living. They thought my hands shook too badly to hold a pen. They forgot those same hands had written every check that raised Clara, signed every paper that kept her fed and clothed, filled every notebook that documented our lives. And now, those hands would document their cruelty. That week I started small. Each night, after they went to bed, I crept into the kitchen with my notebook. I wrote down every insult, every withheld meal, every mocking laugh. I dated each entry, noting the time, the place, the words. My handwriting trembled, but it was legible, proof. When Robert mocked my trembling hands again, I wrote it down. When Clara laughed at my tears, I wrote it down. When I overheard them whispering about homes, about how soon I'd be out of their way, I wrote it down. But writing wasn't enough. One afternoon, while Clara was out with the children and Robert was at work, I unlocked the cedar chest and pulled out my old files. My hands shook as I laid them out on the bed. Bank statements showing withdrawals I never made, bills in my name that Robert handled, letters from the pension office Clara had intercepted. Piece by piece, the story assembled itself. Not just of cruelty, but of theft, of control, of abuse hidden behind closed doors. I began to make copies, slipping them into manila envelopes I hid beneath the lining of my purse. At the pharmacy, I quietly asked the clerk to notarize a few statements. She glanced at me curiously but said nothing. The powerlessness I'd felt for weeks began to shift into something new. Control. I also started practicing. Small things at first. When Robert laughed at me, I stopped lowering my eyes. I looked at him instead, steady, silent. When Clara called me dramatic, I didn't argue. I smiled faintly, as if I knew something she didn't. 'Cause I did. They thought my silence meant surrender. It was actually preparation. The turning point came one evening when Robert leaned across the table and sneered. "What good are you now, Clara? You can't cook without spilling, you can't hold a fork without shaking, you can't live without us. You should be grateful we haven't put you in a home already." Clara laughed. My heart burned, but I kept my face calm. I folded my napkin neatly, placed it on the table, and looked Robert in the eye. "Gratitude," I said softly, "isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn." For the first time, his smirk faltered. That night, I slipped another envelope into my purse, one addressed not to lawyers or officials, but to the local paper. The kind of place where stories of neglect, of families betraying their own, made headlines. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to expose them. Publicly. Mercilessly. As I zipped my purse shut, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door creaked open and Clara peeked in. "Mom," she asked, her voice curious. "What are you doing?" I smiled faintly, sliding the purse beneath the bed. "Just writing," I said. She nodded slowly and closed the door. And in that moment I knew, soon, very soon, she'd learn exactly what I had been writing. The day of reckoning came faster than they expected. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of night Clara liked to host small dinners. Friends from her book club, Robert's co-workers. They filled the dining room with polite chatter and clinking glasses. I was told to sit quietly at the corner of the table, so I wouldn't get tired. I didn't argue. Smiled. I let them believe I was harmless, fading. As the meal began, Robert did what he always did. Turned me into his entertainment. "Careful with that glass, Clara," he said, watching my hands tremble as I lifted my water. "Don't want you spilling it on my suit." Laughter rippled around the table. Even Clara giggled, though softer this time. My tears burned hot behind my eyes, but I swallowed them. Because tonight wasn't about tears. Tonight was about truth. I waited until dessert was served, the perfect moment when everyone was relaxed, unsuspecting. Then I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady, stronger than it had sounded in months. "I have something to share." The room went quiet. Robert smirked. "What is it, Clara? Another story about the good old days?" "No," I said, pulling the manila envelope from my purse and setting it on the table. "It's a story about now." I opened it slowly, deliberately, and spread the contents across the polished wood. Bank statements showing withdrawals into Robert's account, bills signed in Cara's name under mine, receipts for groceries and prescriptions I never received. Neatly written notes, dated and signed, recording every insult, every withheld meal, every time they laughed at my tears. Gasps filled the room. Cara's friends leaned forward, their eyes wide. Robert's co-worker frowned, whispering to the man beside him. Robert's face drained of color. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, my voice cold, "is proof. Proof that my daughter and her husband have spent months mocking me, starving me, stealing from me, waiting for me to collapse so they could take everything I built." I pointed to Clara, who sat frozen, pale as paper. She laughed at my tears. She chose his cruelty over her mother's love. I turned to Robert, whose fists clenched on the table. And he mocked my shaking hands, called me broken, useless. "But the only broken things in this house are the two of you." The room buzzed with whispers. Phones appeared in hands. Someone was already taking pictures of the documents, snapping photos of Robert's furious face, Cara's tears. "You're lying," Robert barked, slamming his fist down. But Fraser, the lawyer I had quietly partnered with, stepped through the doorway at that very moment. She carried a second folder. "No, Mr. Hale. She isn't lying. We've already filed. Elder abuse. Financial fraud. Theft." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Robert sputtered, looking around the table as though someone might defend him. No one did. His co-workers avoided his eyes. Cara's friends shook their heads in disgust. I stood slowly, gripping my cane, but tall, steady, strong. "You tried to break me," I said, my voice ringing through the room. "But you forgot one thing. A mother's strength doesn't die with age. Grows sharper. And now, everyone will see exactly who you are." The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, the story was everywhere. The photos, the documents, the whispers from the dinner table. Local businessman accused of defrauding and abusing elderly mother-in-law. Robert's company cut ties with him immediately. Cara's book club shunned her. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. Investigators seized their accounts. Their so-called friends vanished. The perfect life they had built on my silence collapsed overnight. And me. I didn't just survive. I reclaimed my place. I moved back into my own home, secured and safe. My pantry full, my medicine locked in my cabinet. Neighbors stopped by not with pity, but with respect. They'd seen me stand tall in the face of betrayal. Sometimes I thought of Clara as a little girl again, holding my hand, whispering that we were a team. The memory hurt, but it no longer broke me. Because the woman she became was not the girl I raised. And I had finally let her go. They tried to break me. They mocked, they laughed, they erased. But in the end, it wasn't me who shattered, it was them. Their lies exposed, their reputations destroyed, their power gone. I showed them that even at 82, I was still their mother. And I was stronger than they ever imagined. For more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.